Welcome to this episode of Stories from the Trenches, brought to you by Natera Performance Solutions.
Hi guys, thanks for joining me on my very first Stories from the Trenches. Just a reminder that these are just little bite-sized clips of stories, coaching tips, learnings and lessons. It's not always going to be me contributing. I'm really excited and thankful that there's going to be some other coaches contributing as we go through the months. Maybe every sort of half a dozen episodes, we're going to get stories from far better practitioners than myself, and so I'm really excited about that. Anyway, today's story is entitled The Power of Constraints, or just Bad Coaching and Cueing. So around 10 or 12 years ago was my first introduction to a constraints-led approach, and it was kind of a little bit of an accident, to be honest. Basically, my line manager and I were both servicing the same sport and the same sort of cohort and group of athletes. Not for any particular reason, but just to get a higher quality service out to these athletes and split the group up, so to speak. My line manager took his group, and the key remit was to get these guys with better running efficiency. So we thought about measuring a few key parameters. In particular, we looked at contact time, stride length, and stride frequency at a pace that was going to be intentful enough to really be able to force a change, if you like. So we measured it at 22 kilometers an hour. Anyway, my boss took his group and implemented 500 meters worth of skip running. So literally skip rope running, whereas my group, I preferred to drill them with typical running drills that most people use these days, and also just coach their running and their technique and film them and give them feedback and so on. Anyway, long story short, it was a fairly decent block of training, about 5 months or so of training, and his group had far more significant changes in their contact time, so decrease in contact time, an increase in stride frequency, and an increase in stride length. Much more of a change than my group had. So it was a real difficult learning curve in that respect. Now, at the moment, in today's world, obviously there's a lot of constraints-led approaches used to different training. Running, for example, wickets are very popular now, running over mini hurdles. But back then, that was my real first exposure, and the power of constraints-led approach was a big learning experience for myself. And I guess you can take a number of things from this, really, whether perhaps my coaching and cueing was just not good enough, or whether that actually the power of a constraint, an external constraint to focus on, was actually driving these parameters in these athletes. Now, lately there has been a little bit of an argument on social media between constraints or cueing, and I think, like most things, the truth lies somewhere in the middle. So the effective use of both really is probably going to optimize performance even better. But nonetheless, a harsh lesson learned about 12 years ago on the power of constraints, and potentially to tighten up my coaching and cueing of running.